धृतराष्ट्र उवाच धर्मक्षेत्रे कुरुक्षेत्रे समवेतायुयुत्सवः मामकाः पाण्डवाश्चैव किमकुर्वत Sanjaya.
Verse 1. Dhritarashtra said, on the holy plain of Kurukshetra, Dharmakshetra Kurukshetra, when my offspring and the sons of Panda had gathered together, eager for battle, what did they, O Sanjaya?
Paramhansa Yogananda's monumental exegesis of the Bhagavad Gita's opening verse establishes the entire scripture not as a mere historical prelude, but as a profound psychological allegory, a reality meticulously corroborated by Sanskrit nirukta, etymology, and vyakarana, grammar. The blind king, Dhritarashtra, represents the blind sense-mind. Grammatically parsed as a bahuvrihi compound, Dhritam Rashtram yena so, he by whom the kingdom is tightly held, it derives from the verbal roots dri, to hold tightly, and roj, to rule. This perfectly mirrors Yogananda's definition of the ego's blind, tenacious grip on the bodily kingdom. The battlefield itself is dual. Kurukshetra stems from the root kri, material action or work, denoting the external, restless field of sensory activity governed by pravritti, outgoing tendencies. Conversely, Dharmakshetra arises from dri, to uphold, signifying the internal cerebrospinal axis, the holy plane that sustains the soul's divine faculties through nivritti, inward-turning meditation. The opposing armies represent psychological poles. The Kurush, referred to as Mamaka, my offspring, rooted in the egoic possessiveness of mam or mine, embody the blind, sense-indulgent tendencies. Opposing them are the Pandavas, representing pure discriminative intellect, buddhi. Their purity is cryptographically embedded in the root pand, white or clear, indicating sattvic luminosity. Finally, the narrator Sanjaya is derived from the upasaga, prefix, sam, completely, and the root ji, victory, becoming jaya. Yogananda accurately identifies Sanjaya as impartial introspection, the divine insight of one who has thoroughly conquered the self. The desiderative participle yuyutsava, eager to fight, captures the perpetual psychological friction between these forces. Thus, through rigorous philological validation, this verse serves as a universal mandate for the meditating yogi, an invocation of unbiased self-analysis, Sanjaya, to retrospectively evaluate whether the blind ego or the discriminative soul emerged victorious on the daily bodily battlefield.
Sanjaya uvacha दृष्ट्वा तु पाण्डवानीकं व्यूढं दुर्योधनस्तदा आचार्यमुपसंगम्य राजा वचनमब्रवीत्.
Verse 2. Sanjaya said, then King Duryodhana, after having seen the armies of the Pandavas in battle array, repaired to his preceptor, Drona, and spoke as follows.
Paramhansa Yogananda's exposition of this verse further constructs the psychological battlefield through precise etymological decoding. Sanjaya, impartial introspection, observes the reaction of King Duryodhana to the mobilization of the Pandavas, discriminative faculties. Yogananda identifies Duryodhana as the personification of material desire, the eldest of the blind ego's 100 sense inclinations. The morphological roots of Duryodhana from the prefix dya, difficult, and the verbal root yud, to fight, perfectly encapsulate material desire as the formidable, deeply entrenched usurper of the bodily kingdom, one who is hard to be countered. Confronted by the sudden spiritual awakening of the Pandavas, Duryodhana immediately seeks counsel from his preceptor, Drona. Yogananda meticulously traces Drona to the Sanskrit root dru, to melt, signifying samskara, the subtle, melted impressions of past thoughts and habitual actions residing in the subconscious mind. The allegorical fact that Drona tutored both the Kurush and the Pandavas, yet aligns with the Kurush in battle, illustrates a profound psychological law. unpurified habit inevitably reinforces worldly tendencies. Thus, through the rigorous application of nirukta, etymology, and vyakarana, grammar, this verse transcends a mere historical narrative. It allegorizes the exact moment a meditating yogi faces internal resistance. The awakening of discriminative intelligence instantly triggers material desire to summon the deep-seated momentum of past sensory habits to mount a psychological counterattack.
पश्यैतां पाण्डुपुत्राणाम् आचार्यमहतीं च मूं व्यूढां द्रुपदपुत्रेण तव शिष्येण धीमता.
Verse 3. O teacher, behold this great army of the sons of Pandu, arranged in battle order by thy talented disciple, the son of Drupada.
Paramhansa Yogananda's esoteric exegesis of verse 1.3 brilliantly maps the psychological battlefield of meditation through rigorous Sanskrit nirukta, etymology, and vyakarana, grammar. King Duryodhana, the personification of material desire, addresses his preceptor Drona, the embodiment of samskara, deeply ingrained habits. Duryodhana's panic is directed at the Mahatim Kamam, great army, of the Pandavas, the pure discriminative faculties entrenched in the cerebrospinal centers. This army is strategically arrayed, Vyudam, by Drishtadyumna, the son of Drupada. Yogananda's identification of Drishtadyumna as the calm inner light of divine perception or awakening intuition is masterfully corroborated by its morphological roots. The compound derives from the verbal root drish, to dare, to be courageous, yielding the past participle drishta, bold, confident, unyielding, and dyumna, luminous splendor, rooted in diet, to shine. Thus, Drishtadyumna translates literally to unyielding, confident splendor, a flawless philological match for the unerring, truth-revealing intuition that shatters mental darkness. Furthermore, Duryodhana addresses Drona as a carrier. Grammatically derived from the root kar, to act, to practice, with the upasaga and a carrier is one who teaches by repeated conduct. This strict derivation validates Yogananda's alignment of Drona with samskara, the formidable momentum of past habits. Drupada represents extreme spiritual dispassion, which gives birth to this intuition. The verse thereby captures the precise meditative threshold, the devotee's newly awakened intuition, Drishtadyumna, born of steadfast spiritual dispassion, Drupada, and refined by the habit of meditation, Drona's teaching, organizes the discriminative forces into an unassailable occult array to slay the bondage of past worldly habits.
अत्र शूरा महेश्वासा भीमार्जुन समायुधि युयुधानो विराटश्च द्रुपदश्च महारथः.
Verse 4. Here present are mighty heroes, extraordinary bowmen as skillful in battle as Bhima and Arjuna, the veteran warriors, Duryodhana, Virata, and Drupada, the powerful Drishtaketu, Chaitanya, and Kasharaja, eminent among men, Purujit, Kuntabhoja, and Shibya, the strong Udamenu, the valiant Adamajas, the son of Subhadra, and the sons of Drupadi, all lords of great chariots.
Paramahansa Yogananda's exegesis of verses 1.4 through 1.6 elevates the Bhagavad Gita from a martial epic to a masterful psychological treatise, aligning the Pandava allies precisely with Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga. These chieftains are metaphysical soldiers of the soul, a reality rigorously validated by Sanskrit nirukta, etymology. For instance, Duryodhana, divine devotion or shraddha, derives from the root yud, to fight, signifying the soul's ardent struggle to reclaim divine consciousness. Uttamajas, vital celibacy or virya, combines uttama, supreme, and ojas, vital energy, perfectly describing the physiological transmutation of creative seed into spiritual fortitude. Chekitana stems from sit, to perceive or remember, representing smriti or spiritual memory. Virata, from the prefix six and root raj, to shine forth distinctly, symbolizes the illuminating ecstasy of samadhi. Drupada, from dru, to hasten, and pada, step, embodies Tivrasamvega, the swift, extreme dispassion propelling the yogi. Furthermore, the Eightfold Path itself is personified. Drishtakitu, drish, bold, kitu, intellect, represents the mental resistance of yama. Shaibaya, from shur, auspicious adherence, is niyama. Kuntiboja, pudge, to govern, supports the invoking force as asana. Udamanu, fighting with manu or order, is the life force control of pranayama. And Purujit, fortress, G, to conquer, is pratyahara, the inward conquering of the sensory fortresses. Finally, Saubhadra, Abhimanyu, represents samyama, perfect self-mastery, while the sons of Draupadi represent the 5 spinal centers awakened by the Kundalini force. Through Vyakarana, Yogananda proves conclusively that Vyasa encoded the complete science of yoga into the very morphology of the warriors' names.
दृष्टकेतुश्चेकितानः काशीराजश्च वीर्यवान् पुरुजित्कुन्तिभोजश्च शैब्यश्च नरपुङ्गवः.
Verse 7. Listen, too, O flower of the twice-born, about the generals of my army who are prominent amongst ourselves, these I speak about now for thine information. These warriors are thyself, Drona, Bhishma, Karna, and Kripa, victors in battles, Ashvathaman, Vikarna, the son of Somadatta, and Jayadratha.
Paramhansa Yogananda's commentary on verses 1.7 and 1.8 reveals the profound metaphysical taxonomy of the Kaurava army, aligning each general precisely with the psychological obstacles, kleshas, defined in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. This alignment is rigorously proven through classical Sanskrit nirukta, etymology. Kripa represents avidya, individual delusion, tracing back phonetically to the root krip, to imagine or fabricate. He personifies the ignorance that imagines the temporal body to be the eternal soul. Bhishma represents osmita, egoism, derived from the root p, to frighten or project awe. He is the formidable grandsire of individual existence that rouses the 5 elements into material manifestation. Karna embodies raga, attachment, from the root kri, to act, signifying the compulsive drive toward actions yielding sensory pleasure. Conversely, Vikarna, 6, opposite, plus Karna, signifies dvesha, aversion, the psychological repulsion toward the disagreeable. Jayadratha represents abhinavesha, body attachment, a compound of jayat, conquering, and ratha, chariot or body, perfectly depicting the tenacious grip on mortal existence that conquers spiritual aspiration. Furthermore, Bhurishravas, the son of Somadatta, signifies karma, material action, combining bhuri, frequent, and shravas, stream. He represents the continuous, binding flow of cause and effect. Drona, addressed here as Bhavan, represents vipaka, fruition of habit, stemming from dru, to melt, signifying past actions remaining in a subtle, melted state awaiting manifestation. Finally, Ashvathaman represents ashaya, latent desire, from asva, stored up, and star, to remain, denoting the unquenchable, latent desire seeds preserved in the subconscious. Through Vyakarana, Yogananda demonstrates that Vyasa structurally encoded the supreme psychological impediments to self-realization into the very names of these material warriors.
युधामन्युश्च विक्रान्तः उत्तमौजाश्च वीर्यवान् सौभद्रो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्व एव महारथाः.
Verse 9. And numerous other warriors, all well trained for battle and armed with various weapons, are here present, ready for my sake to lay down their lives.
Paramahansa Yogananda's commentary on verse 1.9 systematically categorizes the numerous other warriors, Anya Ca Bhava Shura, as the Arishadvagas, the 6 fundamental faults, dosas, of the materially identified ego. This psychological taxonomy is rigorously validated through classical Sanskrit nirukta, etymology. Duryodhana himself represents karma, lust or insatiable material desire, the root cause of the conflict. His brother Dushasana embodies krodha, anger, derived from the prefix dur, difficult, and the verbal root shoz, to restrain or control. His name literally translates to that which is difficult to control, perfectly defining the blinding nature of wrath. Lobha, greed, is manifested in the previously mentioned forces of attachment and aversion. Moha, delusion, is personified by Shakuni, the master of deceptive illusion whose cosmic dice play exiles the soul's discriminative faculties. Mada, pride, is represented by Shalya. The word Shalya translates to a fault, defect, or verbal abuse, perfectly mirroring the narrow, arrogant perspective of egotistic pride that repulses others and defames spiritual logic. Finally, Matsarya, envy or material attachment, is embodied by Kritavarma, who is driven by malicious jealousy and the intoxicating addiction to material attainment. Through precise Vyakarana, Yogananda demonstrates that these Nanashastra Praharana, warriors armed with various weapons, are not historical foot soldiers, but the deeply entrenched psychological defense mechanisms of the ego, armed with endless sensory lures, entirely prepared to expend their vitality, Chaktajivita, to defend physical delusion against the awakening soul.
अस्माकं तु विशिष्टाये तान् निबोध द्विजोत्तम नायका मम सैन्यस्य संज्ञार्थं तान् ब्रवीमिति.
Verse 10. These are forces protected by Bhishma are unlimited, but may be insufficient, whereas their army, defended by Bhima, is limited, but quite adequate.
Paramahansa Yogananda's analysis of verse 1.10 masterfully contrasts the opposing metaphysical generals Bhishma and Bhima through precise Sanskrit nirukta, etymology, and psychological allegory. Duryodhana evaluates his asmakam balam, our forces, as aparayaptam, unlimited in number yet fundamentally inadequate, protected by Bhishma. As established, Bhishma represents osmita, delusion-born ego consciousness, derived from the verbal root p, to frighten or project or, denoting the formidable power of the ego that projects the soul into material identification. The ego commands an endless array of sensory temptations, yet remains aparayaptam because its strength is tethered to the finite, body-bound state. In stark contrast, the Pandava army is paryaptam, absolutely sufficient, defended by Bhima. Bhima represents the soul-guided vital force, prana, the essential physiological and spiritual link between matter and spirit. Yogananda emphasizes that Bhima's ultimate weapon is pranayama, scientific life force control. By systematically withdrawing life force from the sensory organs, the yogi starves the ego's outward searchlights, effectively neutralizing Bhishma. Yogananda further delineates this victory through the progression of samadhi, ecstatic union avoiding jada, spiritually barren, unconscious trance, achieving savikalpa, conscious perception of spirit exclusive of creation, and ultimately attaining nirvikalpa samadhi, the supreme, irrevocable realization of the soul as one with spirit, perceiving both the ocean of spirit and the waves of creation simultaneously. Thus, the verse grammatically and allegorically codifies the ultimate metaphysical superiority of soul-guided pranayama over the vast but illusory forces of the material ego.